Hi, everybody. Welcome to Conversation with Calvin, We the Species. And actually, this is spending time with Peter Normandia. I want to make sure I say that right. Is very special to me because he's a filmmaker extraordinary and a documentarian. And these are all the things that I've loved and I thrive on. And I'm so glad. And I thank Lauren Concor from the Garden State Film Festival for kind of setting this up and putting us together because it's like perfect for me because I thrive on filmmakers and journeys and Peter has had some amazing journeys and we're here to talk about this amazing film that he's made called the Neglia Nexus, the story of Louis Neglia and the origins of MMA, which is here. And there's going to be a two minute showing of a trailer at the Garden State Film Festival coming up on the 21st to the 24th in Asbury Park in Cranford. And then at some point in the summer, this film gets released. And there's a million questions I want to ask about this and Peter's journey to become a filmmaker. Beginning in there's so much. So and I'm thrilled you've agreed to do this because again I just thrive on this, Peter.
It's an honor.
Yeah, no, and for me too. So enough with my Johnny Carson monologue. Remember that guy?
Yeah, of course. I
All
do.
right, enough with that. Talk a little bit about yourself early on, some of your education stuff, and then we'll kind of go into Louis Neglia.
Sure. Originally from Brooklyn, grew up in Gravesend, and then moved out to Jersey when I was about 8 years old. Um, Went to school and wound up thinking that it was a good idea, even though I was crazy into movies, to go to business school. So I went to University of Maryland, and then about 2 years into that, I got sick. I had Crohn's disease, wound up coming home and got a chance to kind of rewrite everything. And I was like, you know what, maybe it's time to do what I really want to do. So I wound up going to the School of Visual Arts. I graduated there in 2004. Came out with no idea what to do with myself. So I was training jujitsu for a very long time, and I wound up doing getting into mortgages actually, which is crazy. Had my own little branch and stuff, and then that whole crash happened, and then I was kind of left with only the skills that I had, which was video. So I started a company doing video, and that's kind of grown from there. But along the way, I was trying to become a filmmaker. So I would make a couple of short films here and there, and I thought narrative was kind of my niche. And then it's got to be about 5 years ago, a friend of mine at jujitsu, Chris Howard, actually says to me, he's like, you should really do something on Ring of Combat and Lou Neglia. And I was like, it's a pretty good idea, but I didn't listen. And then a few years later, it kind of clicked, and I was like, you know what, man, Chris, that's really, I think that's what I'm going to do. So I wrote to Lou. I had a mutual connection to him. And the funny story is, when I actually lived in Gravesend, I went to his school when I was 6
Oh,
years old for about a year.
wow.
Yeah. So I had gone to his school, and the way I had run back into him was while training jujitsu. We had a guy from Rutgers Wrestling, one of the best Rutgers wrestlers, Ricardo Romero. He came to train at our school. He wound up going to the UFC, and on his way to the UFC was Ring of Combat, which is Lou Neglia's promotion. So that's when I ran into Lou again. I was like, I know this guy. You got to be kidding me. This is what he's doing now. So I got there, and Dante Rivera's fighting, and Charles Oliveira, and all these big time guys and stuff. And I was like, man, this is some organization, and this is kind of like on the press. This is like the 50s in baseball, where guys were doing it for the passion. There really wasn't a big payday in it. There wasn't like, we're going to be famous. Just before Conor McGregor made all that money,
Right.
and these guys were just out there really for the pride, and working jobs on the side to pay their bills, going to training, and then coming and fighting on the weekend. So I thought it was a really interesting kind of time period and stuff. And then, of course, the UFC exploded, and Forrest Griffin fight, and everything went crazy for that, and it did really well. So after that is when I kind of got back in and was like, hey, this is a really good story. But I didn't know. I had done some documentary stuff, and it was kind of like my thing for business was always finding out about people. I love interviewing, but I was kind of curious on how to do it. So I started listening to some podcasts, people like yourself who put out information and you get to learn from and educate yourself from. And I heard this great podcast with Matthew Heineman, who's an unbelievable documentarian. And he said something that always stuck with me. And he's like, if you finish with the story you started out to tell, you weren't listening along the way. And documentaries are kind of like a discovery process. And once I kind of got that in my head, I was like, that makes a lot of sense. So I initially started out about Ring of Combat, but the real story was Lou Neglia. And it kind of, evolved from there. And then we got into all his background and his neighborhood and all those types of stories and how that kind of evolved and all of that. And I just thought it was an interesting process to go through to really kind of discover a story rather than to start out to tell one.
Right. So Louis,
Mhm.
I mean, he came out of Gravesend also, where back in those days there were two directions,
Yes.
to the mob or elsewhere.
Drugs. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Not good.
yeah.
Yeah.
And how did he discover fighting in that way?
Well, he was always kind of a fighter a little bit, but more of a neighborhood guy, And one of the toughest guys in the neighborhood was his friend. He was a Golden Gloves boxer, this guy Joey. And they were doing their thing along the way, and Joey got in trouble for counterfeit money or something like that. And Lou was like, no, this is not really the life I want to live. This is I can't go away for 4 years and stuff like that. Like that's just not what I want to do. But along the way, he had come across just randomly a karate demonstration. And when he saw this karate demonstration coming out of this neighborhood of tough guys, he realized he's like, these are the real tough guys. Like this is the real tough stuff. So he started diving into it full force and stuff. And then he actually went and challenged his friend Joey for a sparring match, to see. And he beat Joey, and word spread in the neighborhood. And he started teaching stuff out of his house. And that's kind of how his whole career took off. But this was a guy who, a lot of times in martial arts, you hear somebody came from one lineage. They had a master who was really good and taught them, and they did really well in that and so forth. Lou had like 7 masters. Lou just went everywhere he could go to find it and pick parts of all different things. He was never satisfied that, one martial art was the answer. It was almost like he knew mixed martial arts was coming, And he just would go and work with the best people there were. Didn't matter if he had to go to Chinatown in the middle of the night. Didn't matter if it was a black neighborhood that no one had ever, no white guy had ever gone to. He would go there and he would learn. He would earn their respect. He would learn everything about their martial arts, and he would pull the best stuff into his martial arts. And that's how he started teaching his school. And this is a guy who didn't just teach fighters and kids in the neighborhood, to pull them off and kind of take them, put them in the rights. He was teaching special needs kids. He was helping out people for free. This was a guy whose passion was to kind of give martial arts to people because it had changed his life for the better, and he knew it could change everybody else's life for the better.
Wow.
So that was kind of the story we discovered.
Wow. In your documentary, you've interviewed like 40 amazing people in all different shapes, walks of life. I know there was a Nassau County executive you interviewed, because he's involved. I mean, so just a quick overview, just a quick overview of some of the 40 people that you interviewed for this, because they all interacted with Lou.
Lou's life it's crazy. So this is a guy who's changed the lives of, obviously you heard of UFC champions and stuff. So those guys are well known that we interviewed, and that was great. But then there's also guys you never heard of. That's a famous lawyer, a chiropractor, a dentist. A guy who was in a car accident, and because of the shape he was in, he was able to survive. Then actually wound up losing his son, and Lou helped him through that struggle. And now he's got his own school in North Carolina. I mean, there was another guy we interviewed who actually wound up passing. He was suffering from cancer, and all he could talk about was how Lou had changed his life. And he kind of knew that the end was near, but he was so determined to kind of do the interview and wanted to really profess how it had changed his life. So you had guys from all walks of life. I mean, all types of walks of life, all kind of in this dojo. And this is where they kind of, it's equal ground, I guess you would say. And a lot of these guys still work the fights. They've been training for like 40 years with this guy. I mean, your age, and they're still training, and it's unbelievable. These are people who have dedicated their life because of the discipline that he provides. And they all spoke about one common thing, which was kind of interesting, that they would hear Lou's voice in their head, because like some of the sayings he had, some of the things he said, like they would hear the voices in their head during their trying times, and it would give them the confidence to push forward, whether it was a fight in the cage, battling the U.S. government in the law room, sickness, it didn't matter. They all knew that I could get up, I could do this. And I thought that was really interesting. And this is a guy also who treats everybody the same. If you're a UFC fighter or if you're a guy in his school, you get the same respect from him regardless. And I thought that was incredible. And then in addition to that, we interviewed his family. And, as I know you're a big fan of documentaries, and so am I. And one of the documentaries I saw recently, we were actually talking about this, was Stallone's documentary. And it was a great documentary. But at the end, this is a guy who's accomplished. I mean, you'd be so lucky to do anything that guy's done, right? But he still had a little bit of regret because of some of the family stuff that went on in his life. And Lou doesn't have any of that. Lou is like the one guy who kind of lived the perfect professional life, and also he's a grandpa at home. His kids don't even train martial arts. They love him to death like the grandpa is. They didn't even know he was famous until they started going to shows and stuff like that. Wow. So, like, he's kind of walked both lines, which I thought was incredible because you don't usually hear that. Usually someone's dedicated to one or the other. And this guy kind of really figured it out. And that was what the real discovery process was, if you really treat yourself well and you maintain discipline and you do what's really the right thing by people, it should come back to reward you later on.
Yeah.
You might not be the richest guy in the world, but
that's all right. And hey, it's the richness is within.
Yes,
it's
exactly.
within. So I'm pulling out from this that somewhere along that I read what you said, that Lou transcends martial arts, and that's basically what you just said. He transcends. But I'm so intrigued by this because this is just such a slice of life, and I love slices of life, and to discover people who are on a special journey, and so this documentary really, when it comes out, we'll talk about that in a minute or two. It really gives you such a slice and a piece of life and accomplishment and dedication and his journey. So that'll come out this summer, to be seen, really to be seen, because documentaries are life. And you're a storyteller, which I think is one of the great titles that one can wear, to be a storyteller. But by the way, Peter, real fast, well, there's no rhyme or reason why I come up with these things, but what are some of your favorite movies? I always like to ask that.
Favorite? I am such a film buff. I can't even pick, but I mean, I have so many favorite movies. I mean, I like a lot of foreign films. I'm a big fan of Jim Jarmusch. Is probably one of my favorite filmmakers. But I also love, some of the old films. I'm gonna get his name wrong. Michael Pressenberger, and he did The Red Shoes and those movies. I love those movies. All his films are really good. And then also I've been a real big fan of like the 30s gangsters films. I love Howard Hawks films way back in the day and all that kind of stuff. I thought it was interesting how they had to navigate around violence, but it still seemed real violent back then, and I thought that was really good. And then of course in modern day, you got Nolan's and Scorsese's, but I really like I said, Jarmusch, I think, is kind of one of the last guys hanging on there. So those are some of my favorite filmmakers. My favorite films, I got Come and See, it's a war film from Russia. Amelia Klimenov. I mean, that film's changed my life, I feel like. Trying to think what else. I love Scorsese films. Of course, I love Goodfellas and all that kind of stuff. Oh. So, I mean, I grew up from that genre. So all those Wolf of Wall Street, Aviator, those are all incredible films. And then, I have a love also for some great comedies. I grew up in the 80s. So, we have all the John Hughes films and all that kind of stuff too. So, and now what's really interesting is those films, my kids are watching and they love them, and it's not because they're like old films. They watch them like they're new films. And I thought that they kind of transcend that time period, which I thought was interesting. But yeah, as a film buff kind of thing, I've seen way too many movies in my day. And I kind of got into studying directors when I was in film school. And I really got into, that type of stuff and the kind of the styles and things they do, which is why I thought I wanted to be a narrative filmmaker. But I'm not so sure that was my path.
Uh-huh. So interesting, because I love Scorsese. And I'm actually embarrassed to say this, but last week I saw Raging Bull for the first time.
Wow.
Can you believe I let a lifetime, all those years go by, and I watched Raging with De Niro. It's wow. And I just it was such a powerful film.
The way he shot the boxing in that, the black and white and the flashes and all that was just unreal. Like it just really, it's captivating. And then you cut that with the scenes when you got Pesci and him in the neighborhood, going around doing their thing, and it
Yeah,
really captured that time period. I mean, I don't think anyone else can do it like
just
that. Yeah,
just just pure art. And I've come being a film person, and we talked about Casablanca before we went on air. I've now seen that. It's funny.
uh,
I've now seen it over 100 times. Casablanca. And it's funny, we went to Italy a couple of years ago, before the pandemic, and I'm a big guy, 6'5", you can't tell, and I got to sit in first class, and my wife sits in the back, and that's why I have these great flights. I'm not bothered, She's back
yeah,
there, I'm up here, and they had a movie selection, so it's a long flight, and one of the movies they had was Casablanca, so I watched it twice flying to Rome. And coming home, I watched it 2 more times. Uh,
wow,
but what I learned about Michael Curtiz, the director,
yes,
you went to listen, you went to film school. I didn't, but I did as much reading about it. But there's so much using shadows and my goodness, in the way the light would be cast on Ingrid Bergman's face, half shadow, half unshadow. It, it's an art form beyond, and Scorsese is an artist, just a
yeah.
major, wonderful artist. Wow, storyteller,
And,
story.
if, and one of my favorite storytellers, before I forget, because I'll be mad I didn't say this, one of my favorite films ever is Sullivan Travels, Preston Sturges. I think that was one of the best films ever made. It's a story, like you're saying, very similar, where they use a lot of adding up to it, but it kind of seems like a regular comedy. And then at the end, it just drops the hammer with one of the most profound endings that you could ever have in terms of, meaning and life meaning and stuff. And so if you haven't seen that, definitely check that out if you like Casablanca.
Say that again. I'm writing it down.
Sullivan's Travels, Preston
Okay,
Sturges. Yeah,
okay.
1952 or three, I believe.
I'm writing it down.
Yeah.
Taking notes. You did maybe we just briefly touch on it, but you just love documentaries.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
part of the reason why you took this path to tell the story of Lou Neglia. Uh, by the way, also with Lou's Ring of Combat, with all of this, Lou was instrumental, and I don't know, of course people don't know this, but MMA is legal now here in New Jersey, New York, but it was Lou behind the scenes that helped get it
It
legal.
was such an interesting story. So we got to interview Larry Hazard, who's a famous boxing ref,
Yeah,
but also
sure.
runs the athletic commission. I talked to Nick Lembo from the athletic commission, and I talked to Jim Genia, who's an author who wrote a book about the time period, about the underground fighting scene in New York before it was legal. And mixed martial arts, I just talked to Matt Serra about this too. Mixed martial arts was interesting. Like they didn't have that term back then. As Matt Serra said, they had no holds barred, they had freestyle fighting, they would call it, they would just make up these terms, but basically it was a fight. And these guys would get in the ring and they would fight and stuff. And what happened is apparently, because I guess of the original UFC and all this other stuff, they didn't have weight classes, they didn't have really rules, they had just very basic rules and stuff like that. So Jersey and New York would not sanction the fights. So Lou was running legal fights, but they were called a different name up until about, I think it was 2000. And then the athletic commission changed and they got real stringent. There was apparently some beef with the catering union once Zuffa, who has a casino in Las Vegas, had bought the casino. So the catering union had beef with the mixed martial arts thing and the whole boxing situation. So they were given a lot of problems in New York. So they couldn't get it legalized. And the athletic commission would not let them have the fights anymore. So he had to move to Jersey. And when he came to Jersey, he's like, we got to get this legal. Like, this is a great sport and stuff. So he went and met with Larry Hazard and those guys and said, hey, what if we set up some rules? And they went over these ideas of weight
Wow.
classes and so forth and so on, and the rules that are today. And because Jersey set those rules and they were sanctioned there, everyone else kind of followed suit across the country. And then about, I don't know, 7 or 8 years later, New York finally came about and they legalized it as well.
Wow. So
Yeah,
this is Lou,
yeah,
his depth and his range. Um, in my reading, he was in a movie with Bruce Lee. Wow.
yeah, yeah. He kind of won the world championship at Madison Square Garden in 1979,
Hmm.
and he won a couple times, and that kind of took off from there. Had a little short movie career, and those type of things. But then he came home, and he started having guys fight for him because he was kind of getting out of the scene. And when he went to these promotions, he saw that he could do a little bit better. So that's when he started his own promotions and stuff. And they started, and this is the Underground Fighting Club, they called it. They were fighting out of catering halls and clubs in Brooklyn, and restaurant, wherever it was, they could set up a fight. They'd set up these fights in the beginning, and then it kind of evolved to what it is today in Atlantic City.
Wow. It's funny, you're talking about the underground kind of stuff. When I was old enough to understand, my father, I'm looking at a picture of my father over there. My father used to box. He was a tough guy. Not me.
Mm-hmm.
He was a tough guy. During the Depression, he used to
Wow.
box in the back of bars. They'd have a little closed off area, and he would get into a ring and he would box to make a couple of bucks. So he was a boxer. I wasn't, but he was. Interesting uh about Lou. Off topic. I always like to ask this too because it's just as we kind of get to know each other. Here's a great question. Excluding family or friends, somebody living or dead you'd like to spend a day with.
Interesting.
It is interesting.
It's gonna sound crazy, but Martin Luther King,
Okay.
big fan. I
Yep.
really liked his philosophy in life.
Correct.
I'd be definitely curious to talk with him.
Correct. It's funny. You said Martin Luther King. I talk about Martin Luther King in my novel, and I had a shot to see him speak, and this changed the course of my life. In February 1963, before the March on Washington, which was
Hmm.
August 28th, 1963, Martin Luther King came to speak in Newark at a temple because his
Okay.
best
Hmm.
friend was a rabbi in Newark, and I actually belonged to that. And so Martin Luther King is there, not at the peak of his notoriety, uh,
Right.
but and I didn't. I mean, I could have sat in the first row, and I didn't go because I was only 17 and I was stupid and I didn't think and didn't understand and realize. And from that I've fed off of that the rest of my life, that I'm not going to miss these kind of opportunities again. So it's funny you said that. Um, uh, and
He has a famous quote. It's I'm gonna read this right. To be truly free, you have to overcome the love of wealth and the fear of death. And I
wow,
always remembered that. It was not a quote he made in a speech. It was a quote he had told somebody, and
wow,
it always stuck to me. I was like, man, that really makes a lot of sense.
yeah.
You know?
Yeah, so he's been part of my life for a long, long, long time, and feeding off of that, I've had opportunities to meet Emmett Till's cousin, the kid who was killed in 1955,
Yep. Hmm.
Wheeler Parker. I actually gave him a copy of my first novel because it talks about Emmett Till. Uh,
Okay. Yeah.
had a chance to meet and tell what I just told you, that story about my opportunity to see Dr. King speak to John Lewis when he was at
Yep.
Rutgers. And when I told him our connection, he grabbed my hands and held onto my hands. It was, and I still feel it, it's like, wow. So, but anyway, that's a great answer, Peter, a great answer. Talk about the release date and the film and some of the things that are going to happen.
So right now we're in post production. I actually have just really cool. I have all these VHS tapes. We just had transferred over, so we got all the old footage from those underground days and stuff like that, which is awesome. So I just sent that over to the editor. So we're in the heart of post production. about 40 minutes in, I want to say right now and stuff. So we expect to be a feature. And I have one more quick interview with Lou, maybe some other minor stuff and some B-roll and stuff to shoot. But by the summer, I think we should have this thing all wrapped up and out. Yeah.
Great. And you know, when it's all wrapped up, come back and
Oh, I'd love to.
yeah, for sure. For sure. Again, I jump around, but that's okay because jumping around is I love the story that when you were a little kid in Gravesend, you stumbled upon and you were actually
Yeah.
at Lou's school, and
Yeah.
he was a bit of a disciplinarian, correct?
Oh, Lou was the scariest man I ever knew in my life. I was scared of him. I can't even tell you, and not in a bad way, not in a
No.
mean way or anything like that. Just you did not want to do wrong by that guy. And I was in the waiting for my class. There was a ring in the back, and these guys were sparring in the ring. So me and this other kid, I think his name was Pedro, if I remember. Me and this kid, we were mimicking them sparring. I don't know why this was an issue, to be honest. Still to this day, I don't know what if I was distracting the class on the other side or what exactly occurred. But we're doing our thing, and they had like the '70s beads that separated the stuff. And he comes through the beads, and he watches this one. He goes, "You here," and I was like, "Oh man!" So we come over there, and he made us sit on the side and do 1,000 sit-ups. He had one of the brown belts count for us, and we couldn't leave until we did it. So the class ended. We weren't done yet, and he just tells my mother, "Nah, he's in trouble. He's got to do sit-ups before he leaves." And my mom's like,
Wow.
"Nope, no problem. I'll come back."
Wow.
Because those were the days back then.
Wow.
So that was it. I got out doing a little less than 1,000 because the guy was nice to me, but we did a lot. Yeah.
Wow. Great. So life is funny. Life is full circle, from that. And now
Yeah.
your story was life is full circle. I love even contemplating that. Last quick question. Your trailer is going to be shown at the Garden State Film Festival when and where?
It's March 24th. It's the Sunday. It's the 3:15 to 5 p.m. block.
Uh-huh.
And it's showing actually before another MMA documentary on Joe Pyfer, who went to the UFC. It's the road to the UFC. So he actually was a middleweight champion for Lou, which is kind of a small world. So worked out great. And Lauren was great as always. So I love working with the Garden State Film Festival, Diane, all those people that are so passionate about film and they do such a great job. So I was very honored to have my film in there again, or the trailer.
It's great. I love, love, love the Garden State Film Festival. I've been for years. It actually was transformative in my life. And I talk about this all the time. I was at the Garden State Film Festival 6 years ago, literally 6 years ago, and I always wear this because it's my brand. And I decided to brand myself because I was taught you got to brand yourself by Leonardo Del Vecchio, $30 billion in eyeglasses and stuff. And those are one of my takeaways. So I put this on 12 years ago. It stays, I take it off when I go to bed because she gets really ticked off but it's on my head all the time. So I was at the Garden State Festival interviewing some young filmmakers, all accomplished, and some woman came over to me and asked me if I was a Rutgers professor because I had a Rutgers hat on. And at the time I wasn't, and I said, no, I'm not. And she gave me a business card. I gave her mine. And a week later she called me. She's Dr. Gloria Bachman, MD, OBGYN, director of the Women's Health Institute at Rutgers Robert Wood Johnson Medical School. And what I like to do a story. She saw I was a journalist. And P.S. I went to the medical school and they had a lecture which I wasn't particularly interested in, but I'll leave it at that. And a week later, she called me again, and then a week later, I'm at another thing, and then a month later, I'm on the advisory committee of the Women's Health Institute, where I've been now for 5.5 years, and we have
congratulations!
Great friendship, all because of the Garden State Film
Film Fest. Yep.
Boom. So, this has been great, Peter.
Thank you, Cal.
Truly, this is great. And again, the commonality and the stuff you do, I so care about. So I'm formally inviting you to come back as many times as you want. We can do panels, anything. I'm all yours because this stuff is great. I wish you only good things. Come back. We'll stay in touch. I'm gonna kind of stop recording now. Don't leave. We'll do a little wrap. I love saying that.
Sure thing.
Hollywood term. We're going to do a wrap.
Little wrap.
But thank you so much for your passion and your energy and your time. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Calvin. Same to you.